Yeah, I want to talk to you about that first because we're both on the same page. You're probably way more to the left and I'm more in the middle, but we both hate Trump and we voted for Joe Biden. Last night, I was depressed a little bit. Now, listen, I could have gone on the air this morning and I would have been disappointed, but life would go on. I would say, well, Trump's going to be in office another 4 years. When I woke up this morning, Doug, I felt so good. Maybe it was even better than having morning sex. Well, depending on who you're with. That's a bad image for a lot of people listening. But no, in all seriousness, when I had a conversation with my producer this morning and he showed me the numbers and he showed me what's going on in Michigan and Wisconsin, I had probably the biggest smile on my face that I have had in years. And I'm sure you felt the same way.
Yeah, I did. And you know, it's ironic. I'm having the same feelings both you and JD are. Firstly, like you, Brian, I am cautiously optimistic that when all the votes are counted, Biden will be our next president and our national nightmare will be over. But on the other hand, like JD, I'm pissed off too. I mean, given how profoundly Donald Trump has failed and betrayed this nation with his homicidal herd immunity response to the coronavirus, the fact that this election is as close as it is will be a stain on this nation's history for all time.
Good point. You know, Doug, that's a good point because I was speaking to somebody who's a prominent name in the Democratic Party. I'm not going to say who it is, but I'm speaking to this guy this morning off the record. I'm not going to say who he was. And he said, listen, it could be a lot worse. If Joe Biden wins, obviously it's great for the Democrats, but the problem is, first of all, the race was so close, number one. Number two, they're probably not going to take over the Senate. And if you asked me, I'd rather have Trump out of office. And I think if you asked a lot of Democrats, which I'm not, but they would probably say, who would you rather have overtaken the Senate or Trump out of office? They would say Trump out of office. But I agree with you, Doug, and I understand what you're saying. I am surprised that the race is as close as it is. I really am. Why do you think that is, Doug?
Because I'll tell you what it is. I mean, just take North and South Dakota, for example. If North Dakota was a country, it would have the world's worst COVID-19 outbreak in the world. South Dakota's right behind them. And yet both states voted to reelect the guy responsible for the horrific virus numbers.
Right.
And you know why that is? If you drive through North and or South Dakota, and I've hit every state in this country back in my entertaining days, you can pick up Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity on the radio in your vehicle in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
You can't hear you, Brian. You can't hear me.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. All right, so Doug, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that JD has brought up in the first 90 minutes of this show. I don't know if you've been listening. He brought up Sharpies. Arizona's now come out and said that Sharpies are not affecting the outcome of any vote. He also brought up the fact that some counts were stopped for 2 hours and then restarted, and I brought up the fact that you have representatives from Republicans and Democrats and, in most cases, surveillance in these count rooms. So what would you say to people like JD and other people on social media that are putting forth these, what I believe to be conspiracy theories?
Well, to me, it's just a sign of desperation, and I find it funny that all of a sudden now they're concerned about Sharpiegate, but when Trump broke the law and altered a weather map to back up one of his lies, it was no big deal.
JD, what would you say to that?
I mean, I don't see how that's even remotely close to the same thing at all. I mean, it's a much bigger deal if people nationwide in swing states are being given Sharpies with the expectation of knowing that their ballot's going to be invalidated in heavily Republican areas, as opposed to Donald Trump pretending to or trying to cover up a mistake on a clipboard. I think there's a big difference there. But yeah, I guess they did.
Yeah,
I guess in both situations they both use Sharpies. I guess you're right there.
Well, yeah, they both have the Sharpie element in common, and one was actually a felony. The other one has already been debunked.
So here's a question. If those are Republican areas, then are the people giving the Sharpies all Democrats?
I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a fair question. I don't know.
It's just desperate. It's just desperate. They're reaching for anything they can to try and paint this as being the fraud Trump keeps saying it is, but it isn't.
Okay, so when Donald Trump was up by 300,000 votes in Michigan with like 72 or 75% of the vote in, were you worried?
Yeah.
You were worried. Why were you worried?
I was worried because Trump has been telegraphing for weeks that he was going to claim victory on election night and then try to stop the votes from being counted that were either mailed in or voted early. And the reason for that is it all goes back to his failure with the coronavirus and us tree-hugging libtards taking it seriously and voting in person early or voting by mail. And it also goes to the fact that the legislatures in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin are controlled by Republicans. They could have implemented a fix so that they could have started the mail-in and early votes earlier. They didn't.
But
They
Fox,
chose not to.
but Fox stopped that from happening when Fox declared Arizona, which was way too early. I think it was actually at 60% of the vote. It wasn't even 73% because there was an article that came out about an hour ago that said the New York Times had the wrong numbers and they thought it was 98% of the precincts had reported. And it was more like 84%. But when Fox declared Arizona, it really blocked off that way for Donald Trump to declare himself the winner of the election. And then when Fox refused to declare North Carolina and Georgia and Pennsylvania and the states where he had at least 100,000 vote lead, and Biden, he only had 180,000 in Arizona, but they declared it for him. When Fox, and I think Fox is a lot to blame for this year, but when they refused to give Donald Trump those states in the win column, I think it really it prevented him from going out and saying that he did win the election. Do you agree with that, Doug?
It didn't prevent him. He went out and said it anyway.
No, I'm saying but he said that at 1:30 in the morning. I'm saying well before that.
Okay, so
if Arizona wasn't called for Biden, Trump would have won. He would have won Texas. He would have, and I think George would have been called for him, and then he would have gone out and said he won the election. I believe probably around 10 o'clock. No, he would have been totally invalidated. First of all,
JD, he would not have hit 270 with that scenario. You're not, with all due respect, you're not making any sense.
If he thought he was going to win Arizona, he would absolutely.
He would not have hit. No, that's not true.
Yes, it is true.
Okay,
yes,
you need to look up your math because I know I'm right on this.
No,
if he had won Arizona, he would not have hit 270.
If Donald Trump win, and he could still do this, by the way, that he's projected right now to win Arizona based on the votes that are out there. If Donald Trump wins Arizona and Pennsylvania and North Carolina, he wins the election. Oh, and Georgia, he wins the election.
So let me just make 2 points.
He just has to win.
I want to go back to Doug
or Nevada.
I understand
to win the election.
I want to go back
at
to
this
Doug
point, and Pennsylvania.
I want to go back to Doug. I want to make 2 quick points. What I'm saying is, at that time, if they called it, let's just say, and by the way, Arizona has been called. Okay.
Yeah,
that's the breaking news.
That was called last night.
Okay.
I explained that 4 times. It was called well too early.
JD, it was projected last night by Fox. That's not a definitive decision that the race has been won.
Correct.
It's now been called by election officials. Big difference.
Arizona has been called, so Fox News was right. That's number one. Number two, this is hold on a second. Number two, okay, even if they didn't do that, it wouldn't have changed any outcome of anything, and he didn't have a pathway to 270. Number three, for most of the night last night, Joe Biden was winning Ohio. That flipped. The point I'm making is it happens. That happens. It happened with Ohio with Joe Biden. He was winning Ohio for most of the night, and then it flipped to Donald Trump.
Are Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin in the same time zone, Brian?
What does time zone have to do with it?
Why did it take? Why did Ohio get their election results 7 and not now?
Sure, I'll gladly answer your question.
7 hours earlier than Michigan and Wisconsin.
I'll gladly answer.
And I believe Ohio was just as populated, or maybe a little less populated than Michigan is.
I'll gladly answer your question. As I've said before on this show, every state has different rules and regulations on the way they count votes. I'm trying to answer your question. I'm trying to answer your question. Please let me finish. Every state has different rules and regulations. Just because there's a Republican governor and a Democratic governor, I would never assume that there is fraud. That's what you were doing. I will not do that unless you show me direct evidence that there's fraud. Not a couple dozen people on Twitter that are talking about Sharpies. Doug, go ahead.
Well, I don't understand why we're talking about Fox and when they projected a
It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, I mean, all that matters is when the votes are counted, and why we're clinging to what Fox said last night when the votes have been counted and a winner has been definitively declared by election officials. I don't see the point.
Can I just add something else? And JD might not be aware of this because he was just talking about Ohio and why they finished so quickly. Ohio starts counting votes on October 6th. If some of these other states, like Pennsylvania, for example, or some of these other states, or Nevada, for example, started counting the first week of October, I guarantee you they'd probably be in the same position and have more of a definitive answer. It goes back to what I said earlier, Doug. Every state has different rules and regulations. Listen, I wish every state started counting early. That's just not. Whoops. What's going on there? That just is not what happens. And every state has different regulations, right, Doug?
Yeah, and Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin could have changed it to allow the counting of early ballots. They chose not to.
By the way, the breaking news: Trump is still narrowly leading Pennsylvania, but it's narrowing, and Arizona has called it. That is big news. It's official. Joe Biden, regardless of what Fox News said, and by the way, they were right, and I give them credit for that when people are right. CNN are the people that actually held back. MSNBC didn't call it for Arizona. Officially. So let me ask you this, Doug. I put up a poll.
They haven't called it for Biden yet. They haven't called Arizona.
Okay,
for him.
well, I'm just telling you that's the breaking news.
Well, I'm looking at it right now. It's 227
well,
still.
I'm just telling you that's the breaking news. CNN, has been very cautious to their. Listen, I don't care.
And Trump's up 460,000 votes in Pennsylvania.
Okay, well, that's still fairly narrow when you consider they have probably over 1 million votes that still need to be counted. But
1.8 million.
Doug, let me ask you this:
1.8 million? Come on, Doug. 1.8 million? Are you kidding me?
No.
I don't think he's kidding.
Okay, so you know how many voted in the state in 2016, Doug?
I don't know.
I do. 6.2 million.
Okay.
How many have voted so far?
I don't know. I don't know what you're getting at. You might as well go back to
what I'm getting at is nationwide in these Democratic states, there's massive voter turnout, despite the fact that the candidate had very little enthusiasm, and there's a reason for that because the chances are that it's fraudulent, and we're going to find that out.
Chances are it's fraudulent because there's some Sharpies out there. Listen, there's a lot of people on the right. Now that they're all attacking Fox News like Donald Trump has over the course of the last year or two. The only places apparently that are credible to Donald Trump supporters are OAN, Newsmax, and InfoWars.
Well, I mean, Brian, why did they not call Florida for Trump when he was at 96?
Why are you obsessed with who calls it? Who cares?
Because why were they calling it for Biden? Or why did they call Virginia for Biden with 1% of the vote?
JD, let me respond.
I'm curious. Brian, why is that?
And I'm trying to respond.
There's a bias there.
So I'm trying to respond. It doesn't matter.
Hey, Doug, if there's a
he's going to interrupt me again. I'm trying to answer your question. Can you let me just?
If there's 1.8 million out in Pennsylvania, there's 5.6 million that have voted so far. That means that 7.4 million are going to vote in this election.
If I could just respond to what JD just said, it doesn't matter who called what. All that matters is every vote is counted. And what we know right now is Joe Biden has a much easier pathway to become the president than Donald Trump does. We need to wait and see until all the votes are counted and counted fairly. And there is no evidence to support the fact that they're not being counted fairly. Doug, do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's all that matters. As far as what Fox projected means nothing.
It means absolutely nothing. And it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says. I do think that when Trump, I want to ask you about this, Doug. When Donald Trump gets on a stage in the early morning hours and says that Democrats are stealing the election and they calls him a fraud, what do you make of that? Because there's a lot of Republicans, including sitting senators, that have criticized the president of the United States for making the statements he made, and then Mike Pence had to clean it up right after. What do you make of those statements of the president of the United States, the leader of the free world?
I thought it was one of the most dangerous moments in this nation's history. And I like how Trump's media always deflects the conversation to try and paint Joe Biden as this wild-eyed socialist, completely ignoring Donald Trump's blatant authoritarian dictatorial inclinations.
There's nothing authoritarian about saying, I believe that this election was stolen from me. There's nothing authoritarian about that. No, there isn't. No, there is not. But okay, by that logic, then the last 4 years, Russian interference with the election, we talked about that. That was all BS.
No, it wasn't.
Yes,
What are you talking about?
That was complete. That was complete.
What are you talking about?
Donald Trump won. Donald Trump won that election by 74 electoral votes.
They still interfered.
Donald Trump wiped the floor with.
What are you talking about? There's no.
Okay.
For a president of a democracy to go out there and say they're stealing the election. I want the votes not counted in these states, but I do want them counted in those. That's what third-rate dictators do.
No,
Donald
he
Trump
is saying he wants the in-person election day votes counted, but those that just randomly popped up after 2 hours of doing nothing, he doesn't want those. Not just does he not want them counted, but and Doug, this. He's going to go through every single mail-in ballot vote for every single swing state. Mm-hmm. He's going to do that. Like Joe Biden's, he's going to try to declare he's a winner at 4:00. That's not going to go anywhere.
Those are legal votes, by the way.
You don't know that. You have no idea, Brian.
They didn't just pop up.
138,000 votes to zero.
Again, you're going by Twitter. Again, I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm going by a lot of different things, Brian. Mm-hmm. Yes. 138,000 votes to zero.
Ahead,
that doesn't happen, Brian.
Go ahead, Doug. By the way,
the split was supposed to be 60-40 Democrat-Republican.
There is no direct evidence.
For early or mail-in
if
voting.
I can respond now, there is no direct evidence to what JD is saying that there was any voter fraud or that votes, quote unquote, popped up. There's no evidence to support JD's theory there. Go ahead, Doug.
What I find amazing is that the defenders of the biggest cheat and liar that has ever risen to high office automatically assume it's we pacifist tree-hugging libtards that are doing the cheating and are willing to risk going to jail for 5 years. I mean, what is it? Are we pacifist libtards, or are we just masterminds behind a big fraudulent election?
Well, can't you be both?
No.
Do you take vitamins?
And the reality is we are neither.
Because when you say pacifist, that just means you're not violent, but that doesn't mean you can't be devious and deceitful and corrupt.
But you get my point.
I guess.
Or maybe you don't.
Well, I don't know, Doug. All I can tell you is this, and I've said this about 30 times on the show today, and I'm going to say it one more time. I'll probably say it a couple more times on this show. There's no direct evidence of any type of fraud going on throughout the country, no massive fraud. Every vote needs to be counted. That's what they're doing right now. They're making sure every vote is counted. This election is not over. It's looking good for Joe Biden right now. It wasn't looking good for him last night. That's the way elections work. Every vote is going to be counted, including in this state of Nevada. I do believe that the people in Nevada did the right thing by opening the polls later. Whether they were Trump supporters or not, I don't care. That was the right thing to do. So far, what I have seen from these states, they are doing the right thing. And you know what? I don't care who calls a state. I could give a you-know-what. I don't care. But what I do care about is that we have a fair election where every vote is counted. Donald Trump can't go on a stage and say Democrats are stealing the election and they're all frauds. He can't go on a stage and he can't say, well, I want Nevada to be counted. I want Arizona to be counted. But let's not count Michigan and Wisconsin. That is horse you-know-what. And it's typical Donald Trump fashion, Doug, is it not?
It is. And again, it is so indicative of his blatant authoritarianism. And it just amazes me that people are willing to overlook it. But then they have a massive media misinformation machine that doesn't tell them that.
JD, I'm going to say this right now on the show.
And I would argue that CNN is a massive media, and not just CNN, but MSNBC.
What about Fox
and
News?
ABC and CBS
and Fox
and
News?
60 Minutes.
But that's not.
And they're and Twitter and Facebook.
That's what you've been brainwashed into believing.
I've literally watched it happen. I've literally watched Twitter censor specific things.
Then why are you on Twitter all day long?
And Facebook that are positive about Donald Trump or negative about Joe Biden. And the exact same thing applies for CNN and the networks I just mentioned. I've watched it happen the last 2 years.
So why are you on Twitter 24/7 then?
And so the problem, and so right now in the country, if you watch CNN, you don't watch Fox. And Fox, when they take a story, they slant it their direction. CNN does the exact same thing. That's why our show does well, because we don't do that. At least we try not to do that. But when you do that, you're not going to. If you just watch CNN and you don't watch Fox and you've got an issue and you only get their slant and not the other slant, and you don't take the time to, because for whatever reason you don't have it, to actually put it into context for yourself
for JD.
and actually research what is being told to you, you're going to be brainwashed. I'm the exact opposite of brainwashed.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what you're missing. When CNN or MSNBC quotes Donald Trump accurately and even plays what he says and shows you the video and the audio, the fact that it makes him look like the POS he is not media bias.
Well, what they do is they'll play a small piece of it, and they will not explain it in total context. That's what they do. So what I do when they do that is I go and I see exactly what really happened. And then I assess the situation, and if I disagree with Donald Trump, and I disagree with him. If not, then I don't.
I would disagree. I would say that what you do is not go and see what happens. You go and see what Trump's state-run propaganda ministry is spinning it to make Donald Trump look good.
I have two questions. Hold on.
I actually go and I look at the actual situation.
Okay, so I have two questions for JD. If I can jump in here for 10 seconds.
Ministry, which and we'll include China into this, is CNN.
All right. So
I mean, if COVID-19 wasn't such a big deal the last 8 months,
okay. I have a couple questions.
We wouldn't have this mail-in voting issue at all.
Can I jump in?
I want to ask. This was set up from day one.
Okay, let me know when I can jump in for 10 seconds.
There were already just big piles of ballots ready to go.
All right.
And once they knew that Trump was up, they brought those ballots in and they inflated the votes, and that's why the votes increased so much on one side and not on the other side, Brian. And we're going to find that out, I think.
By the way, speaking of, I want to know what really happens. The conservative commentator who tweeted out the map showing that 138,000 votes were dumped in, that tweet has been deleted, and it actually said that he was wrong. It's inaccurate information that you are putting out there.
No, I'm not.
Okay, I just gave it to you.
I'm not.
I just gave it to
I
you.
promise you. It was a very, very
He
clear
said he was
update.
wrong. He said he was wrong. We have the information right here. Stein, give us the information. Coming from the Detroit Free Press, the man who put out that information that you've been so adamant about, that you've been discussing for the last 2 hours, he himself said that he was wrong. You quoted it 10 times today, the first 2 hours of the show. I said there was no direct evidence. I asked you for your sources. Now it's coming out from the Detroit Free Press, and the man who you read the tweet from is admitting that he was wrong. What do you have to say about that?
Fake news.
No, I got to read it first.
Okay, well, we'll give JD a chance to read it. I don't make things up. JD's entitled to his opinions, and I'm entitled to mine. But when we put out false information, it's wrong.
But none of us are entitled to our own facts.
I agree, Doug. All right, so, Doug, let me ask you this before we let you go, because we're almost running out of time here, man. When do you think that when do you think that it'll be official? I'm saying by the latest Friday. What would you say?
Yeah, I think Friday's probably a good bet. It might be sooner.
I hope so. I got to tell you something.
One thing I don't understand, though, is why Trump supporters are that upset. The fact that it's likely Democrats are not going to take back the Senate handcuffs Biden's administration from the get-go. Plus, they've got a 6-3 solid lock on the Supreme Court for when they want legislation.
Doug, that's a huge. Doug, make no mistake about it, Doug. That's a huge problem.
It's because Joe Biden is not going to finish even a year into his first term, and Kamala Harris is a radical socialist.
Okay, so
that's why.
Okay, well,
Kamala Harris is legitimately scary.
All right, well,
her policies are insane.
No, she's not.
Yes, she absolutely is.
We're gonna disagree on that.
She absolutely is. Her response under pressure is just a crazy cackle laugh.
And I agree. The response under this pandemic was fantastic. Doug, the
response was outstanding.
Outstanding.
The virus is spreading.
The majority of Americans disagree with you.
The virus is spreading worldwide.
Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. Doug, I always appreciate.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that the majority of Americans disagree with me.
Doug,
I really don't.
Doug, I appreciate you coming on as always, my friend. Let me tell you something. The next 24 to 48 hours, break out the champagne, my friend. All right?
Yeah.
Break it out. Doug,
I got it ready.
Doug, I love you, my friend. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, always a pleasure, guys. Stay safe.
All right. So